We have the web privacy session right now with like 6 really interesting papers, and we start with Christina. And Kristen is on the job market, so if you have a faculty position that you are looking for a great candidate, she's on the job market. So please.
Thank you, Güneş, so much for the introduction. So, yeah, hello everyone. Today I'm delighted to be here and present the results of our web developer study. This was a joint work with my colleagues Sabrina, Martin, Thorsten, Sascha, and Florian. So, I'm sure you're all familiar with the fact that today modern websites rarely just contain code that's on the server of the website itself, but also lots of different elements from remote servers. So, for example, a blog may deliver some of the main page from its own server, but then there may be lots of different elements from other remote third-party servers. For example, an embedded YouTube video, an Instagram, a social media button, a fancy font that's stored at Google Fonts, and so in the background there might be some JavaScript that's remotely delivered from a content delivery network. And all these elements need to be requested from the remote server with an HTTP request. These third parties are used for a myriad of purposes, so besides those we've already seen, there are loads of others, including analytics, some web protection mechanisms such as reCAPTCHA, comment forms, the ubiquitous advertising, and also the cookie notices that everybody loves. They're also frequently delivered from a third-party service. Now, where's the problem with all that? The problem here is that by nature of the HTTP protocol, whenever something is requested from a remote resource, then the IP address of the user is transmitted as long as with some metadata about their system, like the user agent and technical information about the browser or the screen resolution. And this can be enough to recognize users across sessions, and the third party can also set a cookie on the user system. So this way, when they come to another website that also embeds content from the same third party, they may, over time, accumulate a list of all the sites this person visits, and this way determine their interests, what they're possibly like, their demographics, and so on. And this may already sound a bit creepy, but it gets even more problematic if you're talking about sensitive websites, like health information or hospital websites, or recently this was in the news again because when after the turnover of the Roe versus Wade ruling, then abortion became illegal in some US states, and then people started to worry if tech companies might unveil some information that who visited abortion provider websites if they included some third-party services. And sometimes this can be even wilder when the third-party services load additional third parties, as in the example of this comment plugin that loaded 21 other third parties. And the admin of this website, which is an NGO that supports trans people in the military, she wasn't aware of that, and she was shocked when the markup showed her that all these third parties were included, and she immediately removed it. But we wouldn't have to live with that, so there are plenty of alternatives. We don't really need the big companies that are everywhere and thus can track you across significant portions of the web. So you could always resort to a first-party solution that's self-hosted. I don't endorse any of these third parties, it's just some examples. Or there could be some alternative provider that promises to collect fewer data and have a privacy-friendly approach and is less present on fewer websites. And then you could always do some additional consent. Like here on the top, you can see this is DuckDuckGo's YouTube preview, where you need to click and agree that YouTube is loaded. And in the bottom, we have an inline consent mechanism from The Guardian for Instagram. And some third parties even offer privacy-friendly options, such as YouTube, which has a privacy-friendly mode. But many people don't know that, because in order to see this, instead of the standard embedding code, you need to scroll down. And I'm sure this is done this way on purpose, because with a normal embedding code, as soon as you load the page with the video, then YouTube sets a cookie in your browser while in privacy-friendly mode. This only happens when you actually interact with the video. So we saw all of that, and we've been wondering, why do website creators choose to use third-party services in the first place? Did they consider alternatives like self-hosting or other third parties? Do they know which third-party services are present on their website in the first place? Because like we've just seen, this isn't always the case. Did they make some configuration to protect users' data? And are they aware of the data that the third parties collect? And to investigate that, we created an online survey, which was inspired by a SOUPS 2019 paper. We surveyed 395 people working with websites, and they were recruited from by emailing websites on the Tranco list and developers on GitHub, and this was done in late 2020. So we asked people to think of a website they had recently worked on, so they have a point of reference. And then we asked them what types of functionality was present in this website, and they had to ask we asked them questions for a few of them. And they also had the opportunity to voluntarily tell us the URL of the site, and then we would analyze it with OpenWPM and do some measurements. And most of them did provide their website. And now you may wonder, why this big asterisk next to the GitHub, and why was this done in 2020? It's 2023 now. So this is something I wasn't unsure. First, I was unsure if I should mention that, but then 2 days ago we had this ethics in privacy research session, and there we noted that there's a lack of example cases that you could use to refer to. So I chose to talk about this to help advance the community. So recruiting developers via GitHub commits is something that has been done by various previous work before. It basically works like that. So say you're interested in Python developers, then you search for Python repositories, and you check the latest commit, and then you add .patch. And this shows you the commit metadata, which is publicly accessible, and it contains the email address of the person who did the commit. And these were used in the past to recruit developers for certain programming frameworks, topics. And we also did that, before we did that, because we've done that in the past, and we also consulted 2 data protection officers from 2 institutions, and they individually said, okay, that's okay, that falls under the GDPR's research privilege. But then one person we emailed complained to the local data protection authority, and as soon as we learned about that, we immediately stopped GitHub recruitment. And then a few months later, we would get a letter from the data protection authority, and they said, okay, these addresses on GitHub are not meant for general communication. People just put them on there so that other GitHub users can contact them. So their opinion differed from those of the DPOs we had asked before. And we also learned that people aren't really aware that their addresses are visible in GitHub commits, because this is a bit of a tricky topic. We dealt with all of this. Like I said, we had already asked people, DPOs before. We stopped GitHub recruitment afterwards, and we put up a website that explained how people can make their address invisible in the GitHub commit. And we chose to disclose this in the paper so that the community can learn from this and will in the future no longer use this method for recruitment or be aware of the dangers. But then in the review process, we had, like I said, this was done in 2020, so we were rejected multiple times, and I heard that there were discussions about this. And we were really glad that the paper has finally found a home here at PETS, and we were really appreciated the thoughtful ethics review we got here, who came to the same conclusion that this was okay under the GDPR's research privilege. And we used the GitHub data because people had consented twice that these answers can be used at the beginning of the survey and at the end after we had debriefed them. And we also added an extended discussion of the whole thing in our papers to, like I said, help advance the community. So back to the actual research. So like I said, we had 10 types of third-party functionality that we asked people about. These are here. And first of all, we want to know how they implemented this, or what was present on the site in the first place. And there we found some mismatch between what was present and what was reported in the survey. And for things that were not reported in the survey but were found on websites, the thing we saw most of the time were advertising networks like DoubleClick, probably because they were loaded by other third parties. And in the other direction, we mostly saw, this might mostly have been due to the fact that people had implemented stuff themselves so we couldn't recognize it. We saw that what type of functionality was self-hosted versus what was used hosted by third parties differed on the functionality. So for some, there's just, by definition, you need a third party, like social media integration, or payment is also only practical if you use a third party. For others were typically self-hosted, like embedded audio, and for others it was more mixed, like for programming libraries, they were sometimes self-hosted and sometimes used from a central content delivery network. We also looked at how remote content was embedded, because you can't just use the code from the remote third party, which was most often the case. You can also do your own embedding. So, for example, if you use the Google Maps embed code, you automatically you make the user agree to the Google's privacy policy, which is a bit questionable because they do a lot in their privacy policy. So I looked at the Pets website, what they did, and they put in a screenshot of the Google Map, and linked to the actual map part. So you can choose to click it and then get all the Google data processing or not. So nicely done, Pets folks. We also asked if people used alternatives, but most of them said they didn't, and mostly the decision was just between implementing it yourself or choosing a popular third party. The decision was rarely between two third parties. We also measured if people did privacy-friendly configurations, and we found some evidence of that in the wild, but due to the time running out, I have to skip that now. You can just check it out in the paper. And then we asked people if they were aware of data collection through the third party, and here our main finding was that people are typically more aware of data collection that's closely related to the core functionality of the library. Like if I use analytics, then it's somewhat clear that it collects what people do on the website and their browser information. And if I use a financial plugin, then it's many people understood that it needs financial data, but people were less aware of programming libraries collecting your IP address through the HTTP request. Recently we have seen fines and DPAs saying that, pointing out the risks here, but they were mostly based on the fact that currently we do not have a privacy shield. I just hope this will raise awareness in the future for the whole thing. And what I would like to conclude with is, how can we all as a community help raise awareness of these issues? I mean, when we look at the example of this admin from the NGO website, she was shocked that all of these things were included. And I'm sure that if people were more aware of that, then we could probably work towards more private websites, because we've all seen an example such as the contact tracing in COVID, that if there's enough public discussion, then some change can probably be taking place. Okay, yeah, thank you. And I really would like to talk to you about that.
So maybe a quick question, Christina. So thank you so much for the presentation. Marco asked, did you instrument OpenWPM to accept cookies when you are doing the measurement part of the study?
I'm afraid I didn't do the measurement part myself.
I think I also want to convey that there's a comment that thank you for your thoughtful discussion on the ethics issue in the comments. Maybe you can reply that. Much. Yeah, maybe another call.